Hey, I'm here with Max Bennett. He's the co-founder and CEO of Alby and also the author of A Brief History of Intelligence. So he's got a lot of background on ecom and AI. And I brought him on today because I shared this post from Evo with the Chat GPT or Chat PDP that I like to call it. And you guys really liked it. So Max and I got connected. He's got a lot of background on that particular case. And actually, there's a lot more underneath the surface that went into that experience that I think you'll get a lot of value hearing this case. So Max, welcome.
Super excited to be here.
Yeah, so let's talk about the Evo case. We see the front end part, but what kind of went into it from beginning to launch?
Um, and about a year ago, when I started working on this new company, Alby, we had this idea of taking ChatGPT like technology and embedding it on e-commerce shopping experiences to be a shopping assistant. And so I kind of partnered with Nathan. He was like, great, let's test and experiment and see what works. And so we went on this very long journey, and I'm sure we'll get into it today on many different types of experiences, and most of them failed. So we were always doing very rigorous CSAT scoring. So do customers like the experience? Very rigorous A/B tests. So we did holdout groups. And it took us about 6 months before we finally found an experience that showed really great lift, really great CSAT scores. And now we've been rolling this out across many clients and we're seeing consistent results. But it didn't work out of the gate. It took us a lot of experimentation to get there.
Yeah, I can imagine. A lot of times, I mean, I kind of represent the client or the services side where we think of AI and it's definitely a black box, right? We think, do you just turn this on? Is this a pre-trained GPT model? What kind of effort does our team have to put into it? So what would you say, like, how would a client actually get ready to use a tool like this? Is it just turn it on, or do we need to participate with your team?
So the key thing that the system needs is data about your products. So if you're on an e-commerce platform like Shopify, that process is quite simple. So we have an app in the Shopify app store. You just install the app and upload any other peripheral documents that you might have on products. So it depends on sort of the category. If you're in electronics, then usually there's spec PDFs that you want to just like upload into Alby. If you're in sort of beauty or nutrition, then often there's ingredients, PDFs or lists that you want to upload. But as long as we have sort of rich product information, which usually includes add the app in the Shopify store, upload documents, Alby will work out of the gate. Over time, you can tune the model. So we have really nice flows where if you see responses you don't like or you think can be improved in the interface, you can give feedback and say, I think you should, instead of saying X, say Y. And that data can sort of be an ongoing process. But initially to launch, you just need products and documents about products.
So something that every conversion optimizer and every product owner is scared of is turning something on and then losing control of the experience. So if you've got like, let's say 10,000, 20,000 products, and now all of a sudden they're suggesting questions. It's definitely a heavy lift to ask somebody to test it manually and start checking, whether the questions make sense or even limitations of your own staff expertise. I mean, Evo sells surfboards, skateboards, hiking gear, apparel. Is everyone an internal expert on every single product category? So how did you approach that kind of QA and validating that the questions were good?
So really great question. So there's a few things that we've done. One, on the high level quantitative metrics, there's a bunch of things you can do to directionally know whether this is working at all. So one is to do a holdout group. So we've done many, many holdout groups on Evo. We did the same thing. And so the current experience, we're seeing, multiple percentage points of revenue lift just from adding this to your website. Of the people who engage, you get double digit revenue lift. Wasn't always the case, so it took us a while to get to that lift, but that's one thing you do. Another thing is ask customers whether they're satisfied with the answers. So we sort of did these random tests where we would randomly ask people on a scale of 1 to 5, how would you rate this experience? And at first we were getting very low CSAT scores because people would be like, this is obviously wrong or not useful. And then over time, we got to the point where now, about 85 to 90% of people rated a 4 or 5. Um, and then you can also look at engagement. So what percentage of people actually engage with this thing and then end up buying after engaging with it. So those are sort of high level, just like, do you see this work from a quantitative perspective? From a sort of more in the weeds qualitative sort of quality perspective, there's a few things you can do. One, we have a way in which we can flag questions that got low rankings and then bubble those to the top for experts to review. So in the beginning, there was a few cases for like very niche sort of ski topics where people would say this is a bad response, and we flagged that for an internal Evo expert who took probably a total of 2 hours to fix pretty much all of the issues that appeared, because he just went in and made some minor tweaks to ensure that the system knew the edge case information that it wasn't privy to. You can also just do like very basic spot checking. So you can like randomly go in and just take a sample of questions and just review what you think the quality is. So there's a bunch of different strategies, but you're right that we are entering a new world where there is less determinism. So it used to be the case that people would manually write all the information on the product page, and there's no sort of quality concern because you've vetted every single word. The problem with that, of course, is you're putting a huge onus on the end consumer to do their own research on these really long product pages, or to go off your website to find the information that they want. So there's really only two choices. One is we either just keep our web pages static, or we have to be open to these types of AI experiences that allow consumers to ask the types of questions that they might have, and accept the fact that like we can't monitor every single response. And so it's a sort of a new way to engage with customers, and why you want to work with someone who's gone through the effort to make sure you have all the tools in place to keep quality high.
Well, that was going to be my next question is like, where do you focus and prioritize stuff? So you mentioned you can find the negative feedback from customers and start there. Would you also look at maybe what your flagship or top selling product is and try and optimize that? Or would you focus more on the broken needles in the haystack before trying to hyper optimize your flagship stuff?
No, I think that's a phenomenal point. We definitely see clients that even before usually what people do is they don't just launch it. They upload all their data, and then they go to their top products, and then they see what the questions are and start going back and forth, evaluating, tuning, giving feedback. And so what you're describing, I think, is spot on, which is start with the products that matter the most and make sure those are rock solid. And then for the sort of long tail products, you can sort of see what bubbles to the top.
Did you take an iterative approach with Evo? Did you start with like one category and then perfect that, UI and work out the kinks and then roll it out everywhere? Or did you go full blast from the gate?
We did all categories, but a small fraction of the audience. So we started with like a 10% of the audience saw the experience, but across all products, because we wanted to see which product categories performed the best. And our original thesis was actually that there was going to be categories that it added no value to, and then certain categories added a lot of value, but that wasn't actually what we saw. We saw pretty consistent impact across the board. So we ended up deciding to roll it out across all categories, but our original idea was to identify which categories this mattered for and then only roll it out in those.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. You also mentioned, or I mentioned in the post that the tool kind of auto optimizes which questions get served over time. So is the GPT model generating a ton of stuff and kind of doing what a multi-arm bandit test would do, or, like just trying to see the frequency and learning that way? And how long does that take to like perfect itself in terms of?
Very amazing question. So one of the key learnings we've had is not all questions are created equal. And so what that means is, just because there's a question that is correct that you can put on a page, and even just because you have a question that a lot of people will click on, does not mean that that information will drive people to buy the product. And so what we realized, and this was through testing, we finally got to an experience like the one you see on Evo that got a ton of engagement, but it wasn't really driving lift because some of the questions were ones that drove people to become less likely to buy the product. For example, questions like, do you have a cheaper option? Actually makes people less likely to purchase because it puts them into decision paralysis, as an example. And so the final unlock in our journey, once we got to the point of high engagement, but still flat lift, was in tuning the system to try different types of questions and learn which ones actually drive sales. So now we have a pre-trained system that out of the gate already scores questions based on which ones drive sales. So out of the gate, it usually works, but then it continuously self-optimizes per client. So it's not exactly a multi-arm bandit because we're actually using a neural network to look at product information, look at questions, and score them. So we can predict for which types of products, which types of questions matter. So like a very basic example is warranty information drives a ton of conversions on products like bikes and skis, but drives almost no incremental conversions on products like a hat. And so the scoring filters that out by learning which types of products map well to which types of questions.
Mm-hmm. Is there any way to kind of sort of identify through digital body language or other signals where the level of expertise for a particular individual user, like taking that surfboard example, you can be someone who's just just trying to get in for the first time, or you can be
Yep.
oh man, I can't even think of a famous surfer off the top of my head anymore. Someone who rides barrels day in, day out. So is there
Yep.
ways to kind of optimize based on some kind of signals?
So we today the system doesn't do any form of personalization like you're describing, but our hope is within the next few quarters to allow the questions to be personalized based on the actual browse behavior of a customer on a website. So, to keep the Evo example, that would be inferring their expertise level, the types of sport, which types of sports they're interested in, what types of questions they tend to ask before making purchasing choices, and use that to change the questions that we're prompting people with and change the responses that we get. So today we don't do that. It's sort of the same set of questions for everyone viewing a given product. It's different questions per product, but it's the same for all people viewing a given product. But in the next few quarters, our hope is that we're going to also start personalizing it per user.
Well, I imagine the first set you do 4 or 5, that those could almost be segmentation questions, right? It's that like a salesperson would ask you an introductory, like probing question, and they'll get whatever your first click is, then they'll kind of understand how to flow the rest of the experience.
Totally.
Yeah. Okay, interesting. So on within the Evo team or anybody who's going to adopt this kind of opportunity, do you suggest who owns this on the client side, and how much do you anticipate they need to dedicate to the analysis and the planning and the tender loving care?
So I've seen two types of organizations own this, and in both cases, I see sort of equal success. So I don't know if there's a preference. In the Evo case, it's the e-commerce team that rolls it out, and there's some partnership with the product team, but fundamentally, the e-commerce team is rolling it out through a tag manager. They hook up a product feed to Alby. They uploaded some content, and we were off to the races. For other organizations, like some of I can't name names, but some public like fashion brands we're soon to launch with, it's actually the product team. So the product team who manages the website and the UI UX of the website, they're the ones partnering with us to figure out where they want to place it on the website, and how they want to roll it out. So I think a product team or an e-commerce team both work equally well.
And how, I know like digital maturity is very different and AI maturity is different from company to company. Some people are working with a lot of resources, others not so much. So for this kind of tool, do you need a lot of working with your engineers, your customer success people with the client, or is there at some point where it will be very low touch in the
So
future?
if you're on an e-commerce platform like a Shopify, it's like point and click. We've had people launch this within 20 minutes. If you're not on a Shopify, then the additional things that need to be implemented are product feed and tagging the website. But if you're using a tag manager, it's usually copy and pasting a tag. And then usually folks have a standardized feed approach where you can just push a feed to us. So we have had multiple clients launched within, a day or two. If you're some of our like really large global companies, there's a bunch more process to getting the data flowing to us, and they have a ton more data. So there's a bunch of sort of data feeds that we set up. But for smaller organizations, it usually is a day to a week project from the first conversation to having a test live.
And then you also mentioned to me that you did rounds and rounds of testing to perfect the UI. You tried it a few different implementations in different areas of the site. Can you quickly run through, just in general, your strategy and your approach there?
Yeah. So I've definitely had some like really interesting insights on like consumer insights on how people tend to engage with these types of things that were not obvious when we started out. So the first thing we tried was just embedding a chatbot onto the website. So it was like on the bottom right, there was an AI chatbot. And if you opened it, it was a shopping assistant. It looked like any other chatbot, but it wasn't a decision tree, it's powered by sort of ChatGPT-like technology under the hood. And there was a few challenges that, the numbers were just not good. So that showed no lift and the CSAT scores were bad. But the main challenge fundamentally was that so few people ever clicked on it. So something like 0.2% of people open a chatbot. And of the people that open the chatbot, consumer expectations are this is a support system. So this is the sort of big maybe takeaway for anyone looking at different AI tools out there. There's some really amazing demos. So there'll be a video of someone asking this really crazy question, and then this AI chatbot answering this really amazing answer. But the hidden secret here is, in order to get that amazing answer, a customer had to write that really complex question.
Right.
And in practice, consumers don't do that. What we found is we were hoping people would write these really crazy questions about, hey, I'm a beginner skier. I really love West Coast skiing, but I only like these types of curves. So like, help me pick a ski. The portion of people that wrote those types of questions was practically nil.
Yeah.
And what was much more common is people were confusing us with a support bot, and they were just saying, where's my order?
Right.
So what we found is that the chatbot experience just doesn't really open the door for the types of shopping assistance that we think can be done. We, of course, tried the standard approach of doing these proactive messages from the bottom right. Consumers really don't like that. So when you survey consumers, they really dislike pop-ups. They don't necessarily drive positive lift. So they'll drive clicks, but if you do an A/B test, it's not clear that it's actually driving people to incrementally purchase.
Yeah.
So then we said, okay, let's move away from the chatbot experience. And so what we tried was embedding a button over products where you could hover over it and click ask a question, and then you could type a long form question about the product. And that showed really nice lift numbers, but really low engagement. So what that showed was lots of the people that asked questions about products, they became much more likely to buy. But a very small fraction of people actually click that button to write these long form answers. So that sort of led us to this question of, okay, maybe what's missing here is people in a shopping context don't want to do lots of typing. So, and this is sort of where the analogy to ChatGPT does not hold. People go to ChatGPT to write really complex things because their intent there is to ask it a question that they couldn't get elsewhere. But when people are shopping, they're not interested in writing these really long form questions. They're trained in a shopping context to sort of have very low cognitive overhead in the choices they're making. So that led us this idea of trying to do something much harder. And this ended up being a very long build, but actually use AI to predict the questions, so that the consumer doesn't actually have to think much. They can just sort of click to get their answer. And when we did that, we saw like 10 to 20x lift in engagement. The engagement rate went up, but lift was sort of spotty because for some questions it drove lift, but for other questions it didn't drive lift. So then we had to go, and the final, as I was saying, big breakthrough was building this proprietary system that figures out which questions actually do drive sales. And that's when we finally got to an experience that was good.
That makes sense. On mobile, who wants to
Yeah,
and
no
that
one
kid
wants to type.
embarrassing and
Exactly.
autocorrection and all that kind of stuff. Did you see a
Yep.
difference between mobile and desktop interaction, or is it pretty consistent?
It's pretty consistent. I mean, in general, conversion rates on mobile are lower than desktop, whether you're talking about Alby or not Alby. But the lift numbers are consistent between them. So it seems to be having similar impact. My hunch is with some of the work we're doing now, I expect the impact to actually be even greater on mobile because the challenge with mobile is there's so much less real estate. So on desktop, there's more screen space to present lots of information. Whereas on mobile, you'll really only have very little real estate to give consumers the information they need. So it's a great application of using AI to say, okay, of the 8-page scrolls on mobile of information about a product, how do we condense that into for this specific customer? What are the 3 key pieces of information that they need to know to
Yeah.
actually buy this product? And that's where I think AI can really shine. So we're doing that today, but there's some additional work we're going to do to further optimize on mobile, where I expect that the impact on mobile might end up being even greater than the impact on desktop.
So would you say the engagement rate was similar between devices?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then I have a question about like placement. Is it above the fold for most people, or do they need to scroll past a buy button to see the questions?
So it's the most prominent button on a PDP should always be the buy button or add to cart button. So it's always essential that this becomes a tool for people that are not yet ready to buy. So that's like a very essential UI strategy when figuring out where to place this.
Mhm.
The most of the lift success we've seen is on desktop, having it be under hero images. So secondary to sort of the key purchasing interactions and selection interactions, that's usually on the right side. But above the sort of litany of product information text that you can scroll to below. So depending on your screen size, that can be above the fold. If you have a smaller screen, that'll be right below the fold. For mobile, it's definitely below the fold because the key thing that you see is obviously first, usually imagery, then key sort of size selection and add to cart buttons. And then after that, usually we insert the widget.
Mhm. And would you say that PDP is the primary touch point, or did you also test it upwards at collection category pages, home pages?
So I think product pages is where for a crawl, walk, run strategy is the place to start. It has product pages have so much information, and this is where this application of AI, I think, really shines. We are looking at, and we do have lots of clients that want us to also add this to cart pages and checkout flow pages to help people with decision paralysis there. And we are looking at some ways in which we can add this to sort of category or PLP pages, but we're not doing any of that yet.
Is there, I just had this idea, like, it's not necessarily a good one, but after somebody who has engaged with the bot, can I call it a bot? And they added to cart, would then that be a good segment or a good flow to then try an upsell suggestion conversational experience? And maybe not for people that didn't engage and just simply added to cart, but have you thought of those
So yeah,
scenarios?
no, that's a great idea. So we are very soon, like a matter of weeks, we're going to be rolling out upsell cross-sell into the experience where we're going to not only help people build conviction in the current product they're on, but also help them pair that product with other products in a catalog. So I think it's a phenomenal idea. And that also would carry into cart pages.
Anything else, like any data learnings or any other things that were kind of serendipitous learnings from the project?
I think the key takeaway for me has been that there's 2 ways we can think about AI. One is being sort of reactive, so being this passive tool that people can turn to for solving really like big edge case complex needs they have. And that's really what ChatGPT, the explosion of ChatGPT has been. And there is value in that. So, one should build that and make that available on e-commerce experience. But I think where most of the value lies is actually in being proactive with customers and helping them along the journey, not waiting for them to sort of raise their hand and say, I'm having a challenge. And I think getting that right is where I think there's huge impact for brands and e-commerce websites to build really magical, sort of long lasting relationships with customers, and to have a real quantitative impact on average order values and conversion rates.
Cool. And what about things like SEO and merchandising personalization? Does it feed it into that understanding?
So SEO is a really cool use case for this because we're creating this new data set, which is we now know the exact questions people have on different products.
Right.
And so we can absolutely use that to auto optimize SEO on product pages. So we're not doing that yet, but that's something that we are is on our roadmap. And for merchants, we can get all of this really interesting insight on what types of questions people are asking before buying or before abandoning. So we learn, when people ask this question, this immediately leads them to leave and buy an alternative product or not buy anything at all. And these types of insights can drive products cycles for a brand, or it can drive purchasing and buying decisions for a retailer. So, yeah, I think that insight's going to be really valuable because it used to be the case that we really only had community-driven Q&A data to power that, and that's really sparse because very few people actually enter questions on those sort of community-driven question answer widgets.
Okay, now you gave me another idea because like Zendesk knowledge base and all that kind of stuff, you can do that for SEO. It's almost like if a real customer asks a question and Alby generates a response, that could then be snapshotted, captured, and pushed into a knowledge base that then gets fed into SEO. Because the Google's not going to crawl the conversation. That happens in real time. But that sounds like an opportunity. Could have a massive SEO war chest underneath the
So that's something that's a great point. So actually something we're working with Evo to test is exactly what you're describing. One key thing that one needs to add to that is you can't have an infinitely growing repository because Google will start. What we're going to do is prioritize it and figure out what are the key sort of data points to put on this page so that, Google doesn't ding you for having too much content, but you're getting exactly the right content based on the questions people are actually asking. So yeah, there's lots of things we have to build.
Well, that rolls into my closing question. So you wrote a book called The Brief History of Intelligence. So you've seen where it's been, but where do you think it's going next 2 to 5 years with e-commerce?
I think we're really going to see a very different type of e-commerce UI UX. And I don't think it's going to be, I think the way that people are currently conceiving of it is not right. So, I think the most sort of revolutionary thinkers in this are going to the extreme of maybe there is no e-commerce website and it's just a chatbot. And I definitely don't think that's the world we're going to enter. I think we're going to enter a much more nuanced sort of hybrid world where these types of large language model experiences are going to be embedded in really thoughtful, useful ways throughout a shopping experience. And I think this generative Q&A, which took us like a year to land on, is the first example that I've seen of thoughtfully embedding it in the existing experience to add value where there's sort of synergies between them. And I think we're going to see way more of that. And Amazon, FYI, just so you know, just launched something pretty much exactly like our generative Q&A for Amazon.com. So Amazon Rufus, they're doing an A/B test, but if you're in their test group, what you'll see is as you're scrolling on product pages, they predict questions, and then you can click and get answers. And so my expectation is these types of experiences will become not sort of innovative in 2 to 5 years, but status quo. The same way recommendation widgets are status quo now. It's just going to be expected that websites have these types of guided informational journeys where I can add free form questions if I want, but most of the people are going to just sort of click through to get the information that they need.
Right. And the tech will be democratized, right? This is not going to be only the privilege of the Amazons and Walmarts of the world.
Well, so our mission is to bring this to all other e-commerce companies. And a really key thing that we really care about is small business. So we're trying, one reason we're investing so much in our Shopify app is we want this not to just be like these really large global brands that have these huge data teams that can sort of do all this work. We really want this to be for small e-commerce businesses that want to try things, and they only have a team of one and they only have 2 hours to dedicate to launching it. We are putting a lot of work into making it possible for them too, because I think that's a place where AI can really do good, which is empowering small businesses to do more.
Yeah, definitely. It's exciting to watch the fast moving paces in tech, and good to know that everyone will be able to get their hands on it. So thanks again for sharing all the intel on this. And where can people find you?
So just alby.com, alby.com. You can also go to our LinkedIn page. And I am on Twitter at Max S. Bennett, or X, I should say. So yeah.
Right on. Well, thank you.
All right. Thanks for having me.